Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something pretty mind-bending, the whole concept of contact modalities.
hmm
It's basically this idea, this framework, trying to understand how experiences that seem totally different might actually be linked.
Things like near-death experiences, UFO encounters.
Right, and out-of-body stuff, ghosts, even psychedelic experiences, they seem all over the place, but maybe there's an underlying connection.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And, for a long time, these things have been kept in separate boxes, both in academia and just, well, popular discussion.
definitely.
So what we want to do in this deep dive is really dig into a hypothesis from our source material.
Okay.
The idea that these very different phenomena could be maybe interconnected expressions of consciousness.
Yeah.
Consciousness operating in a reality that's, let's say, bigger than our usual models suggest.
Right, a broader reality. Our main source today is an article that pulls together different theories, lots of personal accounts too, and it proposes what it calls a spiritual virtual reality model of consciousness.
It's a fascinating concept.
It really is. So join us as we kind of unpack this model, look for those common threads, and maybe, just maybe, start thinking about reality in a slightly different way.
Sounds good. Where should we begin? Maybe with the first commonality the article points out.
Yeah, let's do that. The first big one it tackles is the idea of the manipulation of space-time.
Okay, space-time. So
Yeah.
we think of Einstein, right? Space and time woven together, this four-dimensional fabric of reality.
Exactly. And the article contrasts the sort of standard view, the materialist view.
Where consciousness is basically just brain processing sensory input within that 4D box.
Right. Contrast that with what it calls the experiencer perspective, people who've actually had these, well, unusual experiences.
But from that purely materialist standpoint, consciousness directly messing with space-time, that's, well,
Yeah.
it's usually seen as impossible, or at least a major anomaly.
Because it doesn't fit the physical laws as we currently understand them.
Precisely. But the article argues, look, the consistency of reports across these different contact modalities, things like time distortions, feeling outside the body suggests something is interacting with, or maybe even going beyond, our normal space-time.
Okay, so how does the article explain this manipulation of space-time from a consciousness angle?
Well, the core idea is that our consciousness, human consciousness, might be able to interact with something more fundamental, a multidimensional greater reality.
And it links this to Dr. Edgar Mitchell's idea, the quantum hologram.
Yes, exactly. The quantum hologram theory is brought in as a potential way this greater reality might work, like a holographic substrate. And this interaction, the article suggests, could explain why people report time feeling weird, slowing down, stopping, even going backwards in NDEs or other intense experiences.
It's not just time, though, is it? The article talks about 4D space manipulation, too. What's that about?
Right. That's the idea that consciousness isn't necessarily pinned to our physical location in space.
Oh.
It could potentially navigate or access other dimensional realities beyond our usual 3 spatial dimensions plus time.
So our consciousness, maybe the soul, isn't actually stuck inside our heads, inside this 4D reality?
That's the proposition, that the core of us, our consciousness, might operate outside the space-time matrix we perceive.
Which then opens the door to the idea that both human consciousness and what the article calls non-human intelligence, or NHI, could potentially travel within this greater reality, maybe moving between different dimensions, like astral planes or realms people talk about.
That's a really key part of the model. It suggests a shared space, a shared substrate of consciousness where these journeys and interactions happen.
Okay.
But we have to stress, like the article does, this is a theoretical model. It's speculative, pushing boundaries.
Yeah, it's not mainstream physics yet.
Not at all. But it offers a way to potentially connect these dots, these disparate experiences.
The article uses that Matryoshka doll analogy, the Russian nesting dolls, to help visualize this. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, it's a useful picture. Imagine the smallest doll. That's our everyday 4D physical reality. What we see, touch, experience through our senses in linear time.
Got it.
Then, the next doll nesting around it, that represents a 5D reality.
Then what happens in this 5D reality? It goes with the model.
This 5D is seen as a kind of interface layer. It's where consciousness can interact with our 4D physical world, but from a point of awareness outside the physical body.
Ah, so things like out-of-body experiences.
Exactly. OBEs, remote viewing, maybe some types of clairvoyance. The idea is that they happen mainly in this 5D space. Consciousness is still connected to the physical, but it's perceiving beyond the body's limits.
Okay. And the bigger dolls outside the 5D one?
Those represent the higher astral realms,
Mm-hmm.
progressively more fundamental, more expansive dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
In these realms, the model suggests consciousness operates differently. It's not so directly tied to interacting with a physical-like reality as it is in 4D or 5D. It's more, well, perhaps more purely consciousness-based.
And the biggest doll, the one holding all the others?
That represents the ultimate source, the universal mind of God, or universal consciousness. The idea is that everything, all these layers, physical and non-physical, exists within this ultimate consciousness.
So everything is one. Everything is consciousness. That's the foundation.
That's the core principle underpinning this whole model, interconnectedness.
Okay, that gives us the structure. Let's move to the second commonality the article proposes, the travel of human and NHI consciousness.
Right, and this flows directly from the space-time manipulation idea. If consciousness can interact beyond 4D, then it can potentially move between these dimensions.
So all these contact modalities involve consciousness moving across these layers we just talked about.
That's the argument. Whether it's an NDE journey, an OBE, or something else, it involves consciousness shifting its locus, its operational dimension.
And crucially, it's not just our consciousness doing the traveling. The article says NHI consciousness also comes from that same mind of God.
Yes, a shared origin.
Yeah.
And it adds another layer. Maybe many NHI aren't physical in our 4D sense to begin with, meaning they might exist primarily as non-corporeal consciousness in these higher dimensions, and then somehow manifest or interact within our 4D reality when contact occurs.
Interesting. The article uses a two rivers analogy here.
Yeah, imagine two rivers flowing through this multidimensional landscape. One river is human consciousness flowing down into physical life, maybe traveling up through the dimensions in OBEs or NDEs, and then back down.
Okay.
The other river is NHI consciousness, also moving up and down these astral planes, potentially dipping into our 4D world to interact, and then returning to wherever they originate.
To help map this, the article brings in chart #2, talking about our senses in 4D. It goes beyond the usual 5, right?
It does. It includes a sixth sense, identifying it as ESP, extrasensory perception.
Based on Dr. Edgar Mitchell's work.
Exactly. The Apollo astronaut who founded the Institute of Noetic Sciences. He really pushed the idea that ESP is a fundamental part of consciousness, even if it's often untapped.
How did it break down ESP or PSI?
Well, PSI is the broader term. Mitchell included ESP within it, things like telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, but PSI also covers psychokinesis, PK, mind-influencing matter,
Right.
and what the article calls survival phenomena, or theta, basically evidence suggesting consciousness continues after death.
And ESP is seen as kind of a bridge between 4D and that 5D reality we discussed.
That's the idea. ESP operates in that threshold space. Remember, 5D is where consciousness is out of body, but still interacting with the physical world.
Like in OBEs and remote viewing.
Precisely. The article sees both as consciousness working in 5D, using ESP as the way to perceive or interact, since the physical senses aren't the primary tool anymore.
It makes sense why NDEs often start there too, with that out-of-body view.
Exactly. That initial separation, observing the body from above, seems to fit perfectly within that 5D framework.
Okay, now chart #3 goes beyond 4D and 5D into those higher astral realms. What's different there?
The key difference, according to the model, is that in these higher planes, consciousness isn't really interacting with a perceived physical reality anymore. It's operating in realms that might be structured by thought, by energy, something fundamentally non-physical from our perspective.
And this is where the article suggests humans might encounter a wider range of NHI during these contact modalities.
That's the core idea. These higher realms are potential meeting grounds. Chart #3 maps out the possible journey for human consciousness. Incarnating down from the mind of God, maybe popping up to 5D in an OBE or remote viewing, potentially traveling further into the higher planes via astral travel, or even reaching the God source in an NDE, and then the return path.
And for NHI, the chart shows them coming down from those higher realms to interact in 4D and then going back up.
Yes, descending from their native dimensions, possibly originating from the mind of God E2, interacting here, and then ascending back. A sort of parallel traffic flow, if you were.
Let's get into some specific examples of this consciousness travel, starting with NDEs.
Right. NDEs often involve that incredible journey, starting maybe in 5D, but then potentially going all the way up to that ultimate source, the mind of God, that feeling of unity. The article credits pioneers like Dr. Moody, Dr. Grayson, Dr. Ring for documenting these patterns. And it notes the return journey often involves passing back through 5D, seeing the body again before reintegration.
What about OBEs and astral travel? The article makes a slight distinction.
It does, though it admits the terms get mixed up. Technically, it reserves ODE for consciousness moving around in 5D, still somewhat tethered to the physical plane or location.
Okay.
Astral travel is used more for journeys into those higher, completely non-physical dimensions beyond 5D. But yeah, often people just say OBE for both.
And who are the key people or sources mentioned here?
Well, there's Thomas Campbell, the physicist with his huge my big toe theory,
Yeah.
deeply involved with the Monroe Institute.
Right, Robert Monroe himself, who founded the Institute.
Yes, and others who've written extensively about their own experiences, like Luis Minero and Jürgen Zia, really detailed accounts of these other dimensions. And Dr. Charles Tart's early experimental work is crucial too. He noted how OBEs often lead people to believe strongly in survival after death, like they've experienced the soul firsthand. And of course, these ideas are ancient, found in religious traditions worldwide.
Okay, lastly in this section, CCAP UFO contact. How does consciousness travel fit in there?
The idea here is that UFO experiences often aren't just about seeing a craft. They frequently involve the experiencer's consciousness being transported somewhere else.
Like into another reality.
Exactly. The free study on CAP UFO experiencers found many reported contact happening in a matrix-like reality, feeling their consciousness leave their body. And many had histories of spontaneous OBEs anyway.
Interesting.
The book Beyond UFOs apparently gives examples of people taken to these multidimensional places. The author even shares a personal story of involuntary astral travel during a traffic jam, which leads to the speculation that maybe some abduction stories aren't physical kidnapping, but consciousness journeys.
That definitely shifts the perspective away from just nuts and bolts spacecraft. Okay, commonality number 3. Contact with a perceived non-human intelligence. This seems central.
Absolutely. Across the board in all these modalities, people report encountering beings or intelligences they perceive as not human, whether it feels physical or telepathic or just a presence.
So let's look at the types of NHI reported in NDEs first.
The article groups them roughly. Human-looking beings could be deceased relatives, guides, maybe religious figures like Jesus.
Okay.
Then beings of light or energy, often described as God or pure love. And then spirits or angels, often playing a guiding role. It does note the descriptions can vary a lot, maybe influenced by the person's own beliefs, like different people see Jesus differently.
Makes sense. What about OBEs and astral travel? It sounds like the floodgates open there.
Pretty much. The article stresses the incredible variety of beings encountered. Think mythology, folklore, sci-fi fairies, giants, demons, animal forms, you name it.
Wow.
It seems almost tailored to the individual's consciousness, or maybe the specific realm they're visiting. Marilyn Hughes's work is mentioned as documenting this huge range.
Now, CIP UFO-related NHI. The popular image is the little gray alien, but the article says the reality is more complex.
Much more complex. It points to how researchers like Hynek, and especially Jacques Vallée, started moving away from just the extraterrestrial hypothesis.
Towards consciousness.
Yes, or at least something multidimensional. Vallée talks about an intelligence manipulating space-time, using technology, but also having a psychic element.
Right.
And that free study found a massive diversity of NHI forms reported. The most common category wasn't short grays, it was just other.
Other. That could be anything.
Exactly. It mentions odd examples like Carrie Mullis's glowing raccoon story or the Mothman sightings. Vallée's Passport to Magonia is cited for showing how similar encounters with diverse beings happened way back in history, just framed differently.
So what kinds of beings did the Free E study find?
All sorts humanoids of different shapes and sizes, animal-like creatures, energy beings, orbs, a huge spectrum.
But there's still overlap with NDEs, right? Human-looking energy beings.
Yes, those categories appear in both NDEs and UFO contact. The main difference seems to be the sheer variety of physical-seeming humanoid forms reported more often in UFO cases.
What about the short grays, then? If they aren't the most common in UFO reports, where do they fit?
Well, they are reported in UFO contact, just not the most. But interestingly, they also show up in some NDEs and apparently quite often in OB-astral travel accounts. Yeah, which raises the question, are they physical beings visiting? Or are they some kind of archetypal consciousness form encountered across different states? The article gives examples grays seen during OBEs by Marilyn Hughes and Yossi Ronan, during an NDE by Ezequiel Hernandez, even combined ND UFO and OB gray experiences. It really blurs the lines.
Okay, then there's the case of Alberto Fernandez. Sounds like he's experienced well, almost everything.
His story is quite extraordinary, according to the article. He reports seeing a physical Jesus, having an NDE with a divine rescue, tons of KP UFO contact,
Wow.
interactions with various human-looking masters, including Pleiadians, an Asian monk, being taken to other dimensions while awake for lessons, getting information downloads, even seeing a holographic Apple tablet, something another experiencer mentioned too.
A holographic tablet.
Apparently. Plus OBEs showing past lives, another NDE-like event with a guiding voice.
It's a lot.
And then there's the really wild stuff, seeing an apparition of an ancient Asian warlord, and later finding a physical sword with 23 notches that seem to match historical records.
A physical sword just appeared.
Yeah.
And a port.
That's the claim. And the article emphasizes his wife and daughter, both PhD psychologists, have witnessed ongoing paranormal events around him, including ports and even, his wife says, seeing him levitate once.
That's quite the testimony. What about ghost spirits and entheogens?
Briefly, yes. Ghost spirits covers things like after-death communication, seeing deceased relatives with hello from heaven, mentioned as a source.
Okay.
And entheogens, psychedelics are discussed because the experiences often mirror the other modalities. Consciousness seems to leave space-time, interacts with entities similar to those in NDEs, OBEs, UFO contact.
People like the McKennas talked about this a lot.
Right, Terrence and Dennis McKenna, The Rise of Ayahuasca Use. Academic work by Griffiths and Timmerman on DMT and psilocybin is cited, showing people reporting NHI encounters. Timmerman explicitly notes DMT experiences can feel very much like NDEs. There's even a personal story about a friend's DMT trip involving an insectoid mantid being and telepathy, which sounds a lot like some UFO reports.
It really does seem like these experiences bleed into one another. Okay, commonality number 4. Telepathic communications in one's native language. This is specific.
Very specific and potentially very significant. The article argues that across all these modalities, when telepathic communication happens, it's almost always perceived in the person's own native language.
Regardless of the supposed source of the communication.
Exactly. Let's look at the evidence presented. For CAP UFO contact, that free study again, 78% reported telepathy, and 100% of those said it was in their native tongue, English, Spanish, German, Slovak. Didn't matter.
Wow, 100%.
Yeah, and other experiencer accounts apparently back this up, plus Valley's research also found language-specific telepathy.
What about NDEs?
Universal reports, the article claims. Everyone who experiences communication in an NDE seems to perceive it telepathically in their own language. You find it in all the books, the testimonies.
And OB astral travel.
Same story. Researchers and experiencers, the article lists Sellers, Dennett, Hughes, Campbell, Monero, Monroe, Tart, Ziwi, all report telepathy in the native language during these states.
Even with ghosts and spirits.
Apparently so. It mentions Paul Eno's work, John Clamo on channeling, Gary Schwartz on mediumship, the Guggenheim's Hello from Heaven, all pointing towards telepathic communication happening in the recipient's language.
So the article challenges the simple explanation for ET contact, the idea that aliens just have really good translation tech.
Exactly. It asks, okay, maybe ETs have universal translators, but how does a ghost have one? Or being met in an OBE? Especially if the deceased person never even spoke the language of the person they're contacting.
Right, that doesn't add up easily.
So the conclusion drawn is that the technology isn't a physical device.
It's consciousness itself, the universal mind.
That's the proposal, that the common field of consciousness is what facilitates this seamless native language communication.
Fascinating. Okay, the 5th and final commonality. Human-initiated contact and holographic projections. The idea that we can start these interactions.
Yes, that it's not always something just happening to us. That our own consciousness, by connecting with that universal mind, can potentially initiate contact, and that what we perceive might often be like a holographic projection into our reality.
Let's break that down. First, CAPI UFOs and HIC, human-initiated contact events.
Right, Dr. Joseph Birx's term. People actively trying to make contact, using intention, meditation, maybe telepathy. The author shares that personal story again, calling down a UFO after his wife prayed. The details are interesting. Huge objects seem non-solid, the telepathic message, how it changed shape instantly when he mentally challenged it.
And the analysis points out weird things, like not getting photos even though they could have.
Yeah, that and feeling like being in a trance, the weird mosquito distraction. It notes this difficulty getting clear close-up evidence is common in HIC reports.
Suggesting the intelligence involved can read thoughts, maybe influence perception.
That's the implication. Which leads to the idea that maybe the UFOs and beings aren't always physically there in the way we think. Maybe they're more like holographic projections from this consciousness-based intelligence.
Like Valley's idea of UFOs as windows or 3D holograms with mass.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So KP UFO phenomena, at least sometimes, might be consciousness-induced holograms, similar to how other modalities manifest, all rooted in that universal mind. Mitchell's quantum hologram theory is mentioned again as a possible mechanism for how consciousness could project these realities.
What about initiating OBEs or astral travel?
That seems more established. Robert Moreau and HemiSync technology were specifically designed to help people induce OBEs intentionally.
Right.
But the article also notes many people learn to do it themselves through meditation, breathing techniques. It's learnable, initiatable.
And remote viewing. That's definitely something people learn to initiate.
Absolutely. Targ and Putoff at SRI basically developed protocols to train it. People like Ingo Swann, Uri Geller showed a remarkable ability.
Geller, who Mitchell was connected with.
Yes, and there were stories of physical anomalies, apports around Geller too. Then the military got interested, and later people like Ed Dames, Joe McMoneagle taught it widely. Plus, Stefan Schwartz developed his own method earlier. The point is, it's a skill you can initiate.
Okay, how about channeling and mediumship?
Seen as another way to intentionally contact NHI or discarnate beings. Klimo's book on channeling is referenced. It has deep historical roots, seances, shamanism. The article highlights that often people start channeling after having some other major contact modality experience, like an NDE.
Oh, interesting. Like one experience opens the door.
Seems to be a pattern. Examples given are Ruth Ann Friend starting automatic writing after her son died, but she'd had an NDE earlier, and Francisco Valentin starting after an angelic encounter post-NDE. It suggests a strong link. Many experiencers become mediums or channels.
And finally, entheogenic experiences as initiated contact.
Well, yes, in the sense that taking the substance is an intentional act to induce this state. And as mentioned, a large number of users report contact with diverse NHI, experiences that resonate strongly with NDEs, OBEs, and UFO encounters. It's another pathway, albeit a controversial and often illegal one, to potentially initiate these kinds of non-ordinary contacts.
Wow. We've covered a huge amount of ground here, linking all these seemingly separate phenomena. Could you just sort of boil down the core argument one last time?
Sure. The main takeaway, the central thesis of the article, is that NDEs, OBEs, UFO contact, ghost sightings, psychedelic journeys, they aren't really separate things.
Okay.
They're likely interconnected expressions of consciousness interacting with a larger reality, maybe originating from a universal mind or consciousness field.
And they share these common features.
Right. Manipulation of space-time, consciousness traveling between dimensions, encountering diverse NHI, telepathy in the native language, and the possibility of human-initiated contact leading to holographic-like experiences.
The implications are, well, they're pretty huge, aren't they, if this model holds any water?
Absolutely. It fundamentally challenges the standard materialistic view of reality, of consciousness just being a brain byproduct.
Yeah.
It opens up massive possibilities about who we are, what consciousness can do, and our relationship to the universe, including potential other intelligences.
It really does. So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe the question for our listeners to ponder is this. If these incredibly diverse, sometimes bizarre, sometimes profound experiences do share a common root in consciousness, what does that truly tell us about the nature of reality itself, about the potential hidden within our own consciousness, and about how connected we might be to everything we perceive as out there, as other?
And that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something to definitely keep thinking about.